Welcome to Manna-Fest, hosted by international evangelist, teacher, and author Perry Stone. On today's program, you will experience a powerful right now word that will change your life forever. Enjoy unique insight into prophetic and practical truth as Perry ministers using biblical word studies, ancient Jewish history, and Hebrew customs that will cause the Scriptures to come alive as never before. It's time to feast on fresh manna, so get ready to be blessed and encouraged. And now, here is your host and teacher, Perry Stone.
Well, guess what? Manna-Fest is on the air again. Thank you for joining me, not only North America, Canada, but literally every nation of the world. If you have a satellite dish, you can pick up the Manna-Fest program. And I'm happy to tell you that we have a brand new series coming from the nation of Israel with our tour group. Go ahead, you can clap right now. That's a good place. That's a good place to clap. That's a good place to clap. Thank you. And the notes that are in my Bible are very important, but I want to introduce it by saying something. Somewhere this year, we have major conferences. We go to St. Louis, Missouri, and Huntington, West Virginia, and Louisville, Kentucky, Hickson, Tennessee, and so on. Somewhere this year, I'm going to preach a message called, Did 9/11 Initiate the Seasons of Redemption? And there are some ancient Jewish writings that indicate certain things that were going to happen as signs, which seem to have actually started around 2001 on our calendar. Now, I'm not going to deal with that today because I don't have my notes. That's a good excuse, isn't it? But what I am going to do is take you to Matthew chapter 24 and show you something that I think is very interesting, because I want to talk about the birth pains of the final redemption. Matthew chapter 24, look with me at, actually in Matthew 23, Jesus is predicting verses 37, 38, and 39 that Jerusalem is in deep trouble. So then he goes to the Mount of Olives and tells them the temple is going to be destroyed. Then the disciples say, when shall these things be? What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the world? And Jesus begins to teach them certain things that's going to happen. Now, I want to pick up here on verse 3. As he sat up on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the world? Now, the New King James translation says end of the age. That's a proper translation, because the world doesn't end as we know it. Dispensations of governments end. And so the dispensation of human government will end. The dispensation of the Messiah will begin. That's what they're asking about. Jesus said, Take heed that no man deceive you. Many will come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and will deceive many. You hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there'll be famines, pestilence, and earthquakes in divers places. Here's verse 8, main verse. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Now, people often point out to me when I use this verse, they will say, wait a minute. Famines, pestilence, earthquakes, trouble, nation against nation has always happened. So how can you say it's the time of the end or the last days just because it's always been happening? The answer is this. Look, watch how it's worded. All these. Now, most people would never catch all these. He is saying when you see all these things combined at one time. That's right. Did you get it? So in other words, it's not the fact, there has always been earthquakes, there has always been famines, pestilence, but he said, when all these things that you see here happen in one generation at one time and happen more frequently, then you will know you are where at the beginning of sorrows. Now, sorrows is actually, in this passage, an old word that was used by the English. And of course, the King James translation was translated by those of the English language. Sorrows is actually a Greek word for birth pains. So what Jesus is saying here is he's saying all these things are the beginning of the birth pains. Now, if we look at the English translation of the Bible, there are 5 different words for sorrow or sorrowful that actually are 5 different Greek words with 5 different meanings. I want to give those to you right now. In Luke 22 and 45, the disciples are sleeping for sorrow. That Greek word is grief. Romans 9 verse 2, Paul talks about lost souls and the heaviness that he has in his heart, or the sorrow of his heart. That is Greek for pain or distress. Revelations 8 Revelation 18:7, Babylon's destruction brings torment and sorrow. That Greek word means mourning, to mourn over something. Acts chapter 20, verse 38, Paul talked about he would never be able to see the disciples again, and they were in sorrow, and that means an anguish or a pain, just like your heart's hurting. It's a bit like if someone passed away, same thing. Matthew 24, verse 8, however, that Greek word sorrow is birth pains. It literally means a woman beginning to feel the pains of birth. Now, there are, as most women know, and my wife taught me this, and I said, if I preach this on TV and it's wrong, I'm blaming you for it. But she said basically they divide a birth up into 3 trimesters. Am I right? Because I ain't going to go on until you tell me I'm right, okay? And it goes something like this. Stages is a better word. So you got stage 1, which is first month to the 3rd month. And then you got another stage which carries you from the 3rd month to the 6th month, and then the 6th month to the 9th month. And there's different development of the child that happens inside the woman during every one of those particular stages. Now, what is interesting is if you begin to look at what initiates an actual birth pain, and I've really dug this out in Matthew 24 to try to say, what is it that starts? Do you know what it always is? It's a global war. Whenever you see a war, that everyone is becoming, and remember all these things. So when you see a global war, so World War I was an early birth pain, very early. If you look at the number of deaths that took place, the disease that spread, and how many nations it affected, it was a birth pain. What came out of that was the Balfour Declaration, right, giving the Jews access to Palestine, but it didn't birth the nation of Israel yet, because that was first trimester. You understand where I'm coming from? Now, then what happens, which is interesting, is you have World War II, which introduced the Holocaust, which the real root of the Holocaust affecting the Jewish people was 1939 to 1945. Guess how many years that is? That's 7 years. See, the rabbis teach that Jacob's trouble, which is mentioned in the Bible, was that Jacob worked for 7 years and did not get the woman he wanted, so he had to work another 7, and that last 7 is Jacob's trouble. Because he just had to struggle and work by faith to get what he wanted. But if you look at Christian theology, we believe, or let me say it this way, I believe that the Holocaust was just like Jacob had a period of 7 years, right? And he got Leah. Then he worked, 7 years, and he got the one he wanted. So I believe that the Jewish people went through a 7-year Holocaust to birth their nation, but the next 7 years will birth what they want, their Messiah. You see, so the first 7 birthed the nation of Israel, but the next 7, which is the tribulation, out of it comes what? The Messiah. So World War II was the 2nd trimester. In other words, that is what I call the time that first trimester only birthed Israel on paper. You can go back to Palestine, but it wasn't a nation for the Jewish people. The second one absolutely did that, brought the nation forth, but there's coming another one, I just mentioned it, which is the tribulation, which is the big war that the Jews will have during the time of the tribulation of the Antichrist. That will birth the Messiah. That will birth, if you please, the woman in the heavens, giving birth to the man-child that will rule the nations with a rod of iron. See? Woo! Now let's go look into something else here that's very important, because as I was thinking about birth pains, I was thinking about how that in a woman, how many of you women have had children? How many of you men have had? No, I'm just kind of sorry. I get goofy about now on the trip. You have to just bear with me. How many of you women know that there's false labor? Yes. Did you all ever have any false labor? Yes. What's this man shaking his head for over here? What does he know about false labor? All right. False labor would make you think the baby's coming at that moment. You start, so, what's going on? Call the doctor up, and everything's fine, because I don't want to get too personal here, how the baby comes and certain things have to happen. But anyway, let me say this to you. This is important you hear this. There are false labor pains, and then there are real labor pains. Now, let me give you some false labor pains. I wrote some notes down here. There was a man named, the Romans. Let me go back and explain this. The Romans were occupying Israel back in the time of Jesus. And so there would be from time to time individuals that would raise up thinking they could defeat the Roman Empire with a group of people. So here's some of the things they did. There was a man by the name of Theodos that rebelled, led a group of people to the Jordan River expecting the waters to supernaturally open where they could cross, and the Romans killed him. So much for that. Felix in 55 AD was a man that had 30,000 followers who said the walls of Jerusalem would fall on the Romans. And instead, 400 of his followers got killed. Another false Messiah was told people to follow him into the wilderness. He too was killed and destroyed by the Romans. Josephus said that there was a man that had 6,000 followers in the city of Jerusalem that said, God is with us and we can defeat the Romans.